Let me speak to you not as a stranger, not as a textbook voice, but as a doctor, a man who spent nearly 4 decades in clinics and hospitals, looking into the eyes of patients who had questions no one else dared to ask. And now, in retirement, I've come to realize something chilling. There's one question many men carry into old age, but are too ashamed to speak aloud, not even to their closest friends, not even to their doctors. That question is this: at my age, is it still okay to touch myself? I remember the first time an elderly patient brought it up to me. He was 76. Let's call him Walter. He sat across from me, eyes full of hesitation, a gentle tremble in his hands. He didn't talk about chest pain or blood pressure. He leaned in and whispered, "Doc, am I too old to masturbate?" That question broke my heart, not because of what he asked, but because of the fear behind it. The fear that something so human, so personal, could become shameful simply because of age. The fear that pleasure had an expiration date. That his body, once a vessel of strength and intimacy, had become unworthy of care, or touch, or joy. Let me tell you the truth. A truth too many men don't hear until it's too late. It's not about whether you can. It's about how you do it and what it means. You see, I've seen what happens when this question goes unasked. I've seen men slip into quiet despair, their bodies aching not from age but from isolation. I've seen the damage caused by silence, by outdated beliefs, by trying to hold on to youth with clenched fists instead of open hands. The truth is, masturbation after 70 isn't something to be ashamed of, but it's not the same as it was when you were 30 either. And if you try to approach it the same way you did when you were young, fast, intense, goal-driven, you might be doing more harm than good. Let's be honest. Your heart doesn't beat the way it used to. Your nerves don't fire the same. Your prostate has changed shape. Your emotions run deeper, but they bruise easier. And yet, too many men are still out there, in the privacy of their bedrooms, treating their bodies like they're machines, like they have something to prove, like they're in a race against time. But this isn't a race. This is a reckoning. And here's what no one tells you. The greatest dangers aren't just physical. They're emotional, spiritual. The quiet doubts that whisper late at night. Am I still a man? Am I broken? Why doesn't it feel the same anymore? These thoughts carry a weight that no medication can lift, unless we speak them aloud. That's why I've created this series. Not for the 25-year-olds flexing in mirrors, but for the men in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. Men like Walter. Men like you, who are still living, still feeling, still worthy of pleasure, peace, and dignity. So today, we're going to open a conversation that has been locked away for too long. We're going to explore 5 quiet mistakes that many older men make when it comes to self-pleasure. Mistakes that seem harmless on the surface, but can slowly erode your body, your confidence, and your connection to yourself. And no, this isn't a video about guilt or shame. This is about freedom, wisdom, healing. I'll walk you through each point like I would if you were my own brother or my dearest patient. Because I don't believe any man should have to grow old in confusion, in silence, or in fear of his own body. If what I've said so far has stirred something in you, a question, a memory, a realization, then stay with me. Don't click away. The next few minutes may change the way you see yourself forever. Before we begin, if you believe this kind of conversation matters, if you want more videos that speak directly to men in your stage of life, I ask that you support this work, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment to let me know you're here. I'm no longer practicing medicine in a hospital, but this is still my calling. Thank you for being here with me. Now, let's begin. But first, a question for you. If you had to choose, which of these beliefs feels more true to you right now? I believe my body still deserves pleasure and care, even in old age. B, I feel unsure and sometimes think intimacy no longer belongs in my life. Type A or B in the comments below. There's no right or wrong answer, only the beginning of understanding. Your response may just help another man feel seen today. I still remember the day I had a patient named Leonard, 74 years old, once a firefighter in Detroit. Strong hands, proud shoulders, even though the weight of time had softened them. He came to me not with an injury or illness, but with a question that took him nearly 20 minutes to say out loud. When he finally did, it was this: "Doc, why does something that used to feel good now leave me dizzy, sore, and kind of off?" That's when I realized how deeply we failed older men. No one talks to them about how the body changes, not just in what it looks like, but in how it responds. For decades, Leonard had approached masturbation the same way he always had, with force, with rhythm, with speed. He thought that's just how it was done. That's how it should be done. No one ever told him that after 70, the rules changed. And that's what I want to talk about with you today, not to criticize, not to correct, but to protect. You see, when I was still practicing medicine, I saw this time and time again. Men in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, carrying on old routines in a body that no longer operates on the same terms. Their hearts beat differently now. Their blood vessels have narrowed. Their skin is thinner. The nervous system responds slower. Their muscles don't recover the way they used to. But the most dangerous thing isn't the change itself, it's ignoring it. When you masturbate the same way you did at 30 fast hard, sometimes with tension in your arms, back, hips, you're no longer just stimulating yourself. You're stressing your cardiovascular system. You're overworking muscles that are already fatigued from years of strain. You're triggering spikes in blood pressure, heart rate, and even nerve responses that may not be equipped to handle that kind of load anymore. Let me be blunt. What used to be invigorating can now be exhausting. What used to feel like release can now feel like recovery. Some men have reported dizziness, chest tightness, even leg cramps or shortness of breath afterward, not because the act itself is dangerous, but because it's being done with a body that requires a different language. Take, for example, the pelvic floor muscles. Most men don't even know they have them, let alone that they're using them every time they climax. These muscles support the bladder, the rectum, and the base of the penis. But when overused, especially during intense or rapid masturbation, they can become tense, sore, and fatigued. Over time, this can contribute to urinary problems, groin discomfort, or even bouts of incontinence. And these issues don't just happen suddenly. They build slowly, silently, until one day, something that was once a source of comfort begins to feel like a cause of concern. This is why I urge you, as someone who's seen too much regret and too many missed warnings, to shift your approach. Your body is not a machine. It's not something to test or to push. It's something to care for, to listen to honor. That means slowing down. It means letting go of the urge to finish quickly. It means tuning into how you feel, not just what you see. Create an environment that supports ease. Dim the lights. Breathe deeply, relax your jaw, let your shoulders drop. If you feel tension building in your legs or chest, pause. If your breathing becomes shallow or forced, slow it down. These are not weaknesses. These are signs. And when you pay attention to them, you give your body a chance to feel safe again. There's also the matter of posture, something very few people ever talk about. I once had a patient who experienced recurring lower back pain and couldn't figure out why. Turned out, he was hunching over every time he masturbated, compressing his spine, creating a habit of tension that left his body aching for days. Once we adjusted his position, leaning back, supported, open-chested, the pain disappeared within a week. That's the kind of simple shift that makes all the difference at this stage in life. I know some men reading this may be tempted to say, "This doesn't apply to me," but I'd ask you gently, respectfully to reflect. When was the last time you checked in with your body during pleasure? When was the last time you gave yourself permission to go slow? Not because you had to, but because you wanted to feel more? I want to be clear, masturbation is not dangerous. It's not harmful, it's how it's done that matters. And the older you get, the more that how becomes everything. I'm not just speaking to your muscles or your joints. I'm speaking to the part of you that may still believe that slowing down makes you less of a man. It doesn't. In fact, in my years of practice, I've come to believe the opposite. It takes more courage, more strength, more confidence to explore your body gently than it ever took to force your way through it. You're not here to perform. You're here to feel. And the beautiful thing about aging is that sensation becomes richer, deeper, more layered if you let it. What you lose in speed, you gain in intimacy. What you lose in force, you gain in presence. This is not about surrender. It's about sovereignty. It's about reclaiming your body not as a battleground, but as a place of peace. So please, from one man to another, from a doctor who has spent years listening to stories like yours, don't ignore the quiet signals. Don't wait until discomfort becomes dysfunction. Your body has served you for decades. It deserves your attention. It deserves your respect. And yes, it still deserves your pleasure. The key is learning a new way to speak to it, with softness, with breath, with patience. Because when old habits meet a new body, it's not just change, it's transformation. And transformation, my friend, is always possible, at any age, especially now. When I first began my medical practice, decades ago, no one spoke openly about how the mind responds to sexual stimulation. It was either reduced to biology or buried beneath embarrassment. But I've lived long enough and listened closely enough to understand a deeper truth, one that too many men discover far too late. Pleasure is not just a physical act. It's a mental experience. And what you feed your mind, especially as you age, will shape how or whether you feel joy at all. Let me tell you a story. I had a patient, Alan, 79 years old, widowed for 6 years. He was a quiet man, the kind who answered questions in short phrases and always made sure his shirt was tucked in. During one of our visits, he admitted that lately he hadn't been able to feel much of anything. Not sadness, not happiness, not even arousal. It's like my emotions went into hiding, he said. After some gentle conversation, Alan shared that he had started watching online pornography frequently, sometimes several times a day, not out of desire but out of habit, out of boredom, out of a need to fill the silence. He thought it was harmless. After all, it was private. No one was getting hurt. But the truth is, Alan's brain was hurting, and he didn't know it. You see, the brain is a remarkable sensitive organ. It adapts. It rewires itself constantly, especially in response to repeated patterns. When you're young, your brain is more resilient. You can binge stimulation, whether it's loud music, video games, or high-speed erotic content, and still bounce back. But as you age, the brain becomes more sensitive to overload. And it becomes more dependent on routine. This is where the trap begins. Most men don't realize that the kind of pornography available today is far more intense, fast-paced, and artificial than what existed even 20 years ago. It's engineered to hijack your brain's reward system. Each clip, each image, each rapid-fire scene is designed to flood your mind with dopamine, the chemical of yes that feels good, do it again. But when dopamine is released too often, too quickly, and without meaningful context, the brain starts to push back. It adapts. It becomes less responsive. In medical terms, we call this dopamine desensitization. What that means is simple. The more your brain is flooded by artificial stimulation, the harder it becomes for natural experiences to feel satisfying. That's what happened to Alan. He wasn't broken. He was simply caught in a loop. His brain had become so conditioned to the extreme, exaggerated world of internet pornography that real life his memories of touch, of intimacy, even the sound of someone's voice began to feel flat, and this isn't rare. Over the years, I've seen more and more men in their 70s and 80s walk into my office, wondering why they feel numb, disconnected, restless, or even anxious after masturbating. They blame themselves. They think it's just aging. But often, it's the content they're consuming that's quietly altering how their brain interprets pleasure. You might not even notice it happening. That's the cruel part. You begin watching because you feel curious or lonely. Then it becomes a routine. Then the routine becomes the only reliable trigger for arousal. And before long, you no longer feel drawn to imagination or memory or even a warm human connection. You feel drawn to the screen. You feel dependent. And worse, you may start to feel disappointed with real life. Because real life doesn't look like what you've trained your brain to expect. It doesn't move as fast. It doesn't offer endless novelty. It doesn't offer control. But it does offer something deeper if you can return to it. I tell my older patients this all the time. You're not losing your ability to feel. You're losing access to it because your brain is overwhelmed. But that can be changed. One of the most effective things you can do is step away from overstimulating material. Not necessarily all at once, but slowly, gently. Start by switching to content that is slower, softer, more story-driven. Better yet, start relying on your imagination again. Your memories. The feeling of breath. The sensation of warmth on your skin. These are not lesser forms of pleasure. In many ways, they are more real because they come from you. And when you begin to reintroduce your brain to that kind of pleasure, personal, emotional, grounded, you'll start to notice something powerful. Joy begins to return. Not in a flood, but in a quiet ripple. The world becomes less flat. Conversations mean more. A kind word from a neighbor. The sound of birds in the morning, even a favorite meal. All of these things begin to glow again because your brain is no longer running at a frantic pace. Alan did this. With time and patience, he changed his habits. He began writing letters to his late wife not because he expected a response, but because it reminded him what real connection once felt like. He began walking every morning without headphones, just listening to his thoughts. And he told me months later that he could finally feel again, not just during intimacy, but in life itself. I want that for you too. This isn't about shame. You're not bad for wanting stimulation. You're not weak for falling into patterns that millions of men have fallen into. But if you want more peace, more clarity, more pleasure, you have to be willing to give your brain a chance to reset. That starts with awareness. So the next time you reach for your phone or your laptop out of boredom, ask yourself, am I doing this because I feel good? Or because I don't want to feel anything at all? It's a powerful question. And it may lead you back to something you haven't felt in years. Joy that lasts after the screen goes dark. Joy that lingers. Joy that heals. That's what I want for you, not just release, but renewal. Not just stimulation, but satisfaction. Because even now, even at your age, you're still capable of real pleasure. And it begins in your mind. I've always believed that aging doesn't diminish a man's right to pleasure, it simply changes the way we must approach it. Over the course of my career, I've met countless men in their 70s and 80s who still had a strong will to live, to feel, to connect. But I also saw something else. Too many of these men were silently suffering physically, emotionally because of one overlooked part of their body and one deeply neglected part of their being. Let me start with the body. The prostate is a small gland, often no larger than a walnut, tucked deep within the male anatomy. For decades, most men don't even think about it. It just functions. Until one day, it doesn't. And that's when things begin to change slowly, quietly, sometimes painfully. I remember one of my patients, Dennis, a retired school principal from Oregon. He came to me complaining of disrupted sleep, a constant need to urinate at night, and a dull ache in his lower back. At first, he thought it was just age, or the mattress. But after a thorough exam, we realized the real cause: benign prostatic hyperplasia BPH, an enlarged prostate. Common? Yes. But harmless? Not always. What many older men like Dennis don't realize is that continued sexual habits, particularly how one masturbates, can directly impact the health of the prostate. When a man applies too much pressure, delays ejaculation frequently, or tightens his pelvic muscles habitually, it can irritate an already sensitive area. The prostate responds not with gratitude, but with inflammation, discomfort, and dysfunction. Some men think they're training themselves by holding back orgasm or forcing a stronger climax, but this isn't boot camp. This is your body. And your prostate isn't asking for intensity, it's asking for respect. Without that respect, what follows can be chronic pelvic pain, a disrupted urinary stream, or even infections that take weeks to resolve. I've seen men suffer not because they were careless, but because they were uninformed men who meant well, but simply didn't know how their body had changed. But the physical side is only half the story. What haunts me more, what I still carry with me long after retiring, is the way men ignore not just their prostate, but their pain. Not the kind of pain you can diagnose with a scan, but the ache of the soul, the ache of loneliness, the ache of disconnection, the ache of years without being touched, held, or truly seen. I've sat across from men who use masturbation not out of joy, but out of habit, out of grief, out of a need to silence something inside them. And when I asked how they felt afterward, they didn't say satisfied. They said empty. That emptiness is real. It's not weakness. It's not a flaw. It's what happens when physical intimacy becomes a substitute for emotional connection. When self-pleasure becomes the only moment in the day that feels like contact, yet ends in silence. You may not even realize it's happening. You think you're just relieving tension. But if you're honest with yourself, are you also trying to relieve something else? Grief for a spouse who's passed. Bitterness over a relationship that ended years ago. The quiet frustration of feeling invisible in a world that moves too fast for you now. These feelings don't vanish because you ignore them. They just wait. And sometimes, they show up in how you treat your own body. Your prostate isn't the only thing that gets inflamed. So does your spirit when it goes untouched for too long. That's why I urge you gently, as someone who still believes in your capacity for joy, to approach this part of your life differently. Masturbation can be beautiful, healing, a way to reclaim your body as a place of peace. But only when it's done from a place of awareness, not avoidance. If you feel a deep sense of sadness afterward, don't just brush it off. Ask yourself what you're really craving. Maybe it's a voice, a laugh, a walk with someone who remembers your stories. Maybe it's your younger self asking to be held, not physically, but emotionally. You don't have to fight these feelings. You don't have to run from them or drown them in silence. You can meet them, speak to them. And when you do, you may find that your need for release lessens, not because desire fades, but because your soul has been seen. I believe with all my heart that the health of your prostate is tied to the health of your inner world. When you care for both, they begin to align, your body softens. Your nights feel more restful. The tension lifts. Dennis made some changes. He began practicing slower, gentler self-touch. He stopped clenching during climax. But more importantly, he joined a local reading group. He made new friends. He even started volunteering at a school once a week. He told me the physical symptoms didn't vanish overnight, but the pain in his chest, the emotional weight did. And in time, his prostate felt better too. So here's what I want to leave you with. Your body is not betraying you. It's speaking to you. It's asking for a gentler kind of intimacy, one that includes the soul. Don't ignore the prostate. Don't ignore the loneliness. Don't pretend your heart doesn't want connection just because your calendar is full of quiet days. Touch yourself if it brings comfort, but touch your life too, with meaning, with people, with purpose. Because when you do, you'll find that pleasure doesn't just live in the body. It lives in every part of you that's willing to feel again. And at your age, that kind of feeling isn't a luxury. It's a right. When I first began practicing medicine, I believed that the most common struggle men would face as they aged would be physical: joint pain, high blood pressure, prostate issues. And while those were certainly real, there was one issue that surfaced time and time again, quietly, shamefully, behind closed doors, and it had nothing to do with bones or blood. It had everything to do with identity. What does it mean to be a man when your body no longer performs the way it used to? This question haunted so many of my patients. And it wasn't asked with anger. It was asked with grief, with confusion, with a kind of soft, wounded fear. I saw it in their eyes when they talked about struggling to maintain an erection. I heard it in their voices when they whispered, "I just don't feel like myself anymore." They weren't mourning lost pleasure. They were mourning a lost sense of manhood. There was one patient, Bill, a retired Navy officer in his early 80s, strong, proud, disciplined. He'd spent his whole life in command of his ship, his body, his image. But now he found himself lying awake at night, wondering why something as simple as arousal now felt out of reach. He began using masturbation not as comfort, but as a test he feared he was failing. He would time himself, push himself. Try again if the result wasn't what he expected. Let me explain. Erectile dysfunction or changes in sexual response is incredibly common in men over 70. The body shifts. Hormones decline. Blood flow changes. Nerve sensitivity dulls. These are not personal failures, they're physiological facts. But what causes the most harm is not the change itself, it's the belief that these changes erase your manhood. That belief is the enemy. It became a ritual of anxiety. And every time his body didn't respond the way he remembered, it chipped away at something inside him. It made him feel weak, broken, and worst of all, alone. I sat with Bill for a long time, and I told him what I'll tell you now. You're not failing, you're evolving. And what you think is the end of your masculinity may actually be the beginning of something more honest, more peaceful, and more profound. When men turn masturbation into a performance metric, something they must pass in order to feel valid, they create a loop of stress. The more you worry about whether you'll get or stay hard, the more likely it is that you won't. That's not a lack of desire. It's cortisol, stress hormones. The body's natural response to fear, and fear has no place in pleasure. I've seen men become consumed by this fear. They obsess over timelines. They compare themselves to their past selves. They avoid intimacy altogether because they'd rather be alone than risk embarrassment. It doesn't have to be this way. What if, instead of performance, you chose presence? Presence is a word I came to cherish in my later years of practice. It means being here, fully, not chasing a goal, not reliving a memory, just being with your body exactly as it is, with no judgment. When men embrace presence, everything changes. Suddenly, touch isn't a test, it's a conversation. Breath becomes more important than firmness. Connection matters more than climax. And what you discover is something remarkable. Pleasure is still there. It's just quieter now, more subtle, like a whisper instead of a shout, but I understand how hard this shift can be. Most men were never taught how to be present. They were taught how to succeed, how to conquer, how to achieve. But no one told them that their greatest power might come later in life, not through dominance, but through surrender. I don't mean giving up, I mean letting go. Letting go of the idea that you must be the man you were at 30 in order to be whole. Letting go of the timeline, the pressure, the silent shame, and in that letting go, finding something else. A tenderness, a stillness, a sense of dignity that doesn't rise and fall with performance. I've worked with men who thought they were done with intimacy, only to rediscover it in a slower, softer form. One man, George, said that once he stopped chasing erections, he started experiencing something deeper, full-body sensitivity, emotional release, a kind of peaceful ecstasy that surprised him. It wasn't about being hard, he told me. It was about being open. That's what presence does. It opens you. And here's the most important part. Presence doesn't just transform how you experience pleasure. It transforms how you experience yourself. You begin to trust your body again, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. You start to approach each encounter, not just sexual, but emotional, spiritual, with gentleness. You become more aware of your breath, your heartbeat, your needs. You become kinder to yourself. That to me is real masculinity. Not the hardness of your body, but the softness of your attention. Not the duration of your erection, but the depth of your connection. Not the scorecard in your mind, but the silence in your chest when you finally feel peace. So if you're a man watching this and you've been measuring yourself by what your body no longer does, I want you to pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what if this is not the end of my sexuality, but the beginning of my intimacy? You don't have to be young to be whole. You don't have to perform to be worthy. You only have to show up. As a doctor, and as a man who's grown older alongside many of you, I say this with all the wisdom age has given me. Your presence is more powerful than your performance ever was, and it always will be. After walking with you through each chapter of this journey, through the shifting landscapes of the body, the unspoken struggles of the mind, the fragile vulnerability of the soul, and the quiet redefinition of what it means to be a man, I hope one truth has become clear. Aging does not diminish your worth. It does not disqualify you from intimacy. It does not silence your right to feel, to be seen, or to experience joy. In fact, if anything, age invites you into a more honest, more tender, and perhaps even more sacred relationship with yourself. You've spent decades living for others, raising families, working hard, surviving loss, building a life. But this stage of life asks something different from you. It asks not for more achievement, but for presence. It asks not for speed, but for stillness. It asks you to look inward, to meet yourself not with performance, but with compassion. Masturbation may seem like a simple act, but as we've explored together, it is often a mirror. It reflects how we view our bodies, our desires, our fears, and our unspoken griefs. When done without care, it can become a habit of avoidance. But when done with awareness, it can become a healing ritual, a way to reconnect with the body not as a tool to be tested, but as a companion to be loved. We've uncovered the dangers of ignoring the body's changing needs. We've talked about the overstimulation of the modern brain, the hidden toll it takes on memory, mood, and connection. We've examined the silent suffering of the prostate and the soul, and the emotional hunger that physical release alone cannot satisfy. And most importantly, we've questioned the old belief that manhood must be proven through performance. Because now, more than ever, presence is the true power. This is not about giving something up. It's about gaining something deeper, a new relationship with pleasure, a new sense of dignity, a new understanding that aging, far from being the end of intimacy, may actually be the beginning of intimacy with truth. And what do we do with that truth? We live it. We honor it. We stop hiding from our own reflections. We stop apologizing for needing softness, for wanting connection, for slowing down. We begin to trust our own pace. We begin to listen. And most of all, we allow ourselves to feel freely, fully, without shame. This is how we reclaim our bodies. This is how we heal our minds. This is how we age not in silence, but in strength. So wherever you are in your journey, know this. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are simply becoming, and becoming takes time. If these words have spoken to you, then I invite you to continue walking with me. There is more to explore, more to learn, more to reclaim. Because this path we're on, it's not just about surviving age, it's about living it richly and fully. Now, I have a question for you. Do you believe that intimacy at your age can still grow deeper, not disappear? A. Yes, I believe it can deepen with time and awareness. B. I'm still unsure, but I'm open to learning. Please take a moment to type A or B in the comments. Your voice matters. Your perspective could help another man find his courage. And I'd love to know where you stand so we can grow together. If you found this video helpful, I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel and consider donating even just a little. I'm no longer a practicing doctor, but in this chapter of my life, I want to give back. I want to share what I've learned. I want to be of service. And your support, no matter how small, helps me keep doing that for you and for others like you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And thank you for honoring this conversation with your presence.